The power went out at exactly 11:47 p.m. Sarah checked her phone. No signal at all. The blizzard had been growing stronger all evening, and now the old family cabin was swallowed in darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the fireplace she'd kept alive. Her parents wouldn't return until Monday, 2 days from now. She was 23 and more than capable of spending a weekend alone in the mountains. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mr. Bone. Let's continue. That's what she kept telling herself. The cabin had been in her family for generations. Her grandmother used to tell stories about the harsh winters of the 1950s, when people would get snowed in for weeks. Sarah had always loved those stories. Now, wrapped in a blanket by the fire, she wasn't so sure. The wind howled against the windows, driving snow in horizontal sheets. She could barely see 3 feet beyond the glass. The thermometer outside read -12 degrees Fahrenheit. Without power, the electric heating was dead. Just the fireplace and the propane stove. She was scrolling through downloaded movies on her phone when she heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps. In the snow. Outside. Sarah froze, finger hovering over her phone screen. She strained to listen over the wind. There it was again, deliberate, heavy footfalls in the deep snow, circling around the side of the cabin. Her heart hammered. Who would be out in this weather? The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, and the road was completely impassable. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps moved along the back wall now. Sarah slowly stood, keeping the blanket wrapped around herself. She moved to the window, careful to stay in the shadows. The fire cast dancing orange light, but beyond the glass was only swirling white darkness. Then she saw it. A shape. Tall, impossibly tall, standing just at the edge of the firelight's reach. It didn't move like a person. It swayed slightly, as if the wind passed through it rather than against it. She couldn't make out features, just a dark silhouette against the snow. Sarah backed away from the window, her breath coming in short gasps. She grabbed the fireplace poker, the iron heavy and cold in her hand. The footsteps continued, completing their circuit around the cabin. They stopped at the front door. Silence. Just the wind. Just the crackling fire. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Sarah had locked it. She knew she had. The old brass knob rotated clockwise, testing the lock. Once. Twice. Then it stopped. Knock. 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 3 deliberate raps on the solid wood door. "Who's there?" Sarah called out, hating how her voice shook. No answer. Just the wind. She waited, poker raised, for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Nothing. No more footsteps. No more knocking. Carefully, she moved to the front window and peered out. Nothing but snow and darkness. No tracks. But that was impossible. She definitely heard footsteps, and the snow was deep. There should be tracks. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She kept the fire burning and sat in the corner where she could see both the front door and the back window. Every creak of the cabin settling, every gust of wind, sent ice through her veins. Dawn came gray and dim through the continuing storm. In the pale light, Sarah finally worked up the courage to open the front door. The snow was pristine. Undisturbed. Not a single footprint anywhere near the cabin. But there, hanging from the door handle, was something that made her blood run cold. A small bundle of twigs bound with what looked like hair, arranged in a deliberate pattern. An old symbol her grandmother had once mentioned, a ward against the winter spirits, or an invitation to them. She'd forgotten which. Sarah grabbed her keys and gear. Blizzard or no blizzard, she was leaving. She made it to her car, started brushing off the snow, and that's when she saw them. Handprints. All over her car windows. Dozens of them. Small handprints, like a child's, pressed against every window. But these prints were wrong. The fingers were too long, too thin, and there were too many of them. She looked up at the cabin's windows. Every single one had the same handprints pressed against the glass from the inside. Sarah ran for the main road through waist-deep snow, not stopping even when she heard the footsteps behind her, matching her pace exactly, getting closer with each crunch, crunch, crunch in the snow. She was found 3 hours later by a snowplow driver, hypothermic and delirious, a mile from the cabin. She kept screaming about the children with too many fingers who wanted to come inside. The police checked the cabin. Empty. No signs of forced entry. No handprints on any windows. But in the fireplace, they found something odd, dozens of small bones arranged in a circle, still warm to the touch. When they asked Sarah about it, she swore she'd never seen them before. The cabin has been empty ever since. The family refuses to go back. Sometimes, on the coldest winter nights, hikers report seeing firelight in the windows and hearing children's laughter echoing through the mountains. But there are never any footprints in the snow. Story 2. The sound from upstairs. Marcus had bought the old Victorian house for a steal. Sure, it needed work, but it had good bones. That's what the realtor kept saying. Good bones. He should have asked what else it had. He moved in on a Friday in late January. The house was 3 stories, far too big for one person, but he was a writer and needed the space. The 3rd floor would be his office. The 2nd floor, his bedroom. The main floor, everything else. That first night, exhausted from moving, Marcus fell asleep quickly despite the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the old house settling. He woke at 2:17 a.m. to a sound directly above his head. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, rhythmic, like someone walking. But there was nothing above his 2nd floor bedroom except the empty 3rd floor. He'd been up there just before bed, no furniture yet, just bare wooden boards and his desk waiting to be assembled. The thumping continued for about 30 seconds, then stopped. Marcus told himself it was the house settling. Old houses do that. He went back to sleep. The next night, the same thing. 2:17 a.m. Thump, thump, thump. This time it seemed to move, traveling from one end of the ceiling to the other. Then silence. On the 3rd night, Marcus decided to investigate. At 2:15 a.m., he positioned himself in the 3rd floor room, lights on, sitting in the corner with a baseball bat. He felt ridiculous but determined. 2:17 a.m. came and went. Nothing. Annoyed and tired, he went back downstairs to bed. The moment his head hit the pillow, he heard it. Right above him, on the 3rd floor where he'd just been sitting. Thump, thump, thump. Marcus grabbed his phone and bounded back up the stairs 2 at a time. The sound stopped the instant he reached the 3rd floor landing. He turned on the lights, checked every corner, the closet, everything. Empty. But the floorboards were warm where the sound had been coming from. Warm, as if someone had been standing there. That's when he noticed the dust. The room was covered in a fine layer of dust from the renovations, except for one spot. A perfect clear circle, about 6 feet in diameter, right where the thumping had been loudest. No footprints. Just a clean circle on the dusty floor. Marcus set up his phone to record that night, placed it in the 3rd floor room with the camera pointing at that spot. At 2:17 a.m., lying in bed, he heard the thumping again. Louder this time. More insistent. In the morning, he checked the footage. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the image became distorted, filled with static. Through the interference, he could make out movement. The dust in that circle was swirling, rising up as if disturbed by something spinning. And there, barely visible through the static, a dark shape. It looked like someone hanging. Swaying. The thumping sound matched the rhythm of the swaying. Marcus did some research. The house had been built in 1887. In 1923, a man named Edward Priestley had lived there. He'd murdered his wife and 2 children before hanging himself on the 3rd floor. The date, January 23rd. At 2:17 a.m., according to the newspaper report, his body had been discovered by the milkman, still swaying slightly despite being dead for hours. The murders had happened on the 2nd floor, where Marcus's bedroom was now. That night, Marcus packed a bag and decided to sleep at a hotel, just for one night to clear his head. But as he was leaving, he made the mistake of looking back at the 3rd floor window. There was a figure standing there, silhouetted against the darkness. Tall, thin, with its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Marcus ran to his car. As he fumbled with his keys, he heard it, a deep, grinding sound from the house. He looked back and saw the 3rd floor window opening, slowly, though there was no wind. The figure leaned out. Even from the driveway, Marcus could see that its neck was broken, the head lolling to one side. It raised one arm and pointed directly at him. Then it smiled. Marcus drove away and never returned. He had the house sold sight unseen, taking a massive loss. The real estate agent who handled the sale asked why there was a rope burn in the ceiling beam of the third floor and why all the bedroom doors on the second floor were scratched from the inside, as if someone had been trying desperately to get out. Marcus didn't have an answer. He'd never seen those scratches before. The house has had 7 owners since Marcus. None have stayed longer than 3 months. The current owner refuses to sleep on the second floor. She's put a lock on the third floor door, but she says she still hears it. Every night. 2:17 a.m. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of something swaying in an empty room. Story 3. The Ice Fisher. Tom had been ice fishing since he was a kid. 40 years on the frozen lakes of Minnesota, and he thought he'd seen everything. He knew the ice, knew the sounds it made, knew when it was safe and when to pack up and leave. That's why what happened on Lake Windermere shook him so badly. It was late February, the coldest part of winter. Tom had driven out to his usual spot on the lake, a deep section about a mile from shore where the pike were always biting. The ice was solid, 3 feet thick. Perfect conditions. He set up his shelter at dusk, a small insulated tent over his fishing hole, and settled in for a long night. He liked the solitude, the silence of winter nights on the lake. Just him, the stars, and the fish. Around 10 p.m., he caught his first pike. A good-sized one, maybe 8 pounds. As he was unhooking it, he heard something that made him pause. Tapping. On the ice. Outside his shelter. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Like someone knocking. Hello. Tom called out, unzipping his shelter door. The lake stretched out in all directions, bathed in moonlight. Empty. No one there. The nearest shelter was a good quarter-mile away, and Tom could see its faint light in the distance. Tap, tap, tap. There it was again. Closer now. Definitely coming from under the ice. Tom felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. In 40 years, he'd never heard anything like that. Fish don't tap. Ice doesn't tap like that. He grabbed his flashlight and pointed it down the fishing hole. The beam penetrated about 15 feet into the dark water before disappearing. Nothing visible. Tap, tap, tap. Right below him. Then the line on his fishing rod jerked. Hard. Tom grabbed it instinctively, and whatever was on the other end pulled with incredible force. The line screamed out, and Tom barely had time to brace himself before something surfaced in the fishing hole. But it wasn't a fish. It was a hand. A human hand, pale white and dripping, reaching up through the hole, fingers grasping at the edges of the ice. Tom scrambled backward, kicking over his chair. The hand kept coming, followed by an arm, then another hand. Someone was climbing out of the water through his fishing hole, an impossibly small hole for a person to fit through. But they were fitting. A head emerged. A woman's face, blue-lipped and frost-covered, eyes wide open and staring directly at him. Water streamed from her hair as she pulled herself further out of the hole, her body seeming to contort and compress to fit through the narrow opening. Tom found his voice. Jesus Christ! Are you okay? How did you? She smiled. Her teeth were black, her gums gray. Help me, she whispered, her voice like wind over ice. So cold. Tom reached for his phone to call for help, but the woman's hand shot out with impossible speed and grabbed his wrist. Her skin was so cold it burned. Her grip was like iron. Stay, she said, still smiling that horrible smile. Stay and fish with me. Tom tried to pull away, but she was pulling him toward the hole. His feet slid on the ice. He could see now that she wasn't climbing out, she was trying to pull him in. With his free hand, he grabbed his ice pick and swung it at her arm. The pick connected, but instead of blood, there was only water. She was made of water, or ice, or something in between. Her arm separated where he'd struck, but instead of releasing him, both pieces kept pulling. Tom screamed. Other fishermen, those tiny lights in the distance, would never hear him over the wind. The woman's face was inches from his now. He could smell lake water and rot. Her eyes were completely black, no whites, no iris, just darkness. "My turn to fish," she whispered. "You have been fishing in my lake for 40 years, Tom. Taking and taking. Now it is my turn." How did she know his name? She pulled harder, and Tom's legs went into the hole. The water was so cold it felt like fire. He screamed again, clawing at the ice, but there was nothing to grip. He was going in, inch by inch, pulled down by impossible strength into the black water beneath the ice. His last thought before going under was that he could see others down there, shapes moving in the darkness below, waiting with patient hunger. Tom's truck and shelter were found the next morning. The shelter was undisturbed, everything in place. His fishing gear was neatly arranged. The hole in the ice was frozen solid, as if it hadn't been opened in days. Tom was never found. But here's what made the search party leave and never come back. When they cut a new hole in the ice to search the water below, they found Tom's ice pick embedded in the ice on the underside. 40 feet down, driven deep into the ice from below. And when they looked into the dark water with their searchlights, they saw them. Dozens of them. Shapes beneath the ice, looking up, pressing their pale hands against the frozen surface. The lake was closed that season. But every winter, ice fishermen still go out on Wintermere. Most come back. But every season, one or two don't. Their shelters are found intact, their holes frozen over, and their gear neatly arranged. As if they simply decided to go for a swim in the middle of winter and never came back up. If you ever go ice fishing on Wintermere, and you hear tapping beneath the ice, pack up. Leave immediately. Don't look down the hole. Don't answer if something calls your name. And whatever you do, don't let them pull you into the water. Because once you're down there, you don't drown. You become one of them. And you wait, patient and hungry, for the next fisherman who stays too long on the ice. Story 4. The Whiteout. The thing about a whiteout is that you can't tell earth from sky. Everything becomes the same blank white, and you lose all sense of direction, distance, depth. People have walked off cliffs thinking they were walking on flat ground. People have frozen to death 10 feet from their own houses because they couldn't see where they were going. Rachel learned this the hard way. She was driving home from her nursing shift at the county hospital, a route she'd taken hundreds of times. The snow had been light when she left, but within 10 minutes it became a full blizzard. The wind picked up, and suddenly she couldn't see anything. Not the road, not the sky, just white. She slowed to a crawl, gripping the wheel with both hands. Her headlights reflected off the snow, making visibility even worse. She should pull over, wait it out, but there was nowhere to pull over. The country road had no shoulder, just deep ditches on both sides. Then she saw it, a figure standing in the middle of the road. Rachel slammed on the brakes. The car fishtailed but stopped. Through the swirling snow, she could make out a person. At least, she thought it was a person. They were standing completely still, facing away from her, wearing what looked like a white coat or dress that blended with the snow. She honked her horn. The figure didn't move. Rachel rolled down her window, snow immediately blasting into the car. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" No response. The figure remained motionless. She grabbed her phone. No signal. Of course not out here in this weather. She'd have to get out and check on this person. They could be hurt, disoriented, freezing. Rachel put the car in park, left the engine running, and stepped out into the blizzard. The cold was shocking, stealing her breath. The wind howled, driving snow into her face hard enough to sting. "Hello," she called out, walking toward the figure. "Are you hurt?" As she got closer, she could see more details. It was a woman in a long white dress, completely inappropriate for the weather. Her hair was long and dark, whipping in the wind. She was barefoot in the snow. "Ma'am, you need to get in my car. You're going to freeze to death out here." Rachel reached out to touch the woman's shoulder. The woman's head turned 180 degrees without her body moving. Her face was gray, her eyes solid white with no pupils. Her mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, and she screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of the wind, of cracking ice, of winter itself given voice. Rachel stumbled backward, falling into the snow. The woman began to turn her body to match her head, her movements jerky and wrong, like a marionette with tangled strings. Rachel scrambled to her feet and ran back to her car. She dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. Through the windshield, she could see the woman walking toward her with that same jerky, inhuman gait. Rachel threw the car into reverse, but the wheels spun uselessly. She was stuck. The woman was 10 feet away now. 5 feet. Rachel closed her eyes and prayed. When she opened them, the woman was pressed against the windshield, her white eyes staring directly at Rachel, her mouth still open in that endless scream. But Rachel couldn't hear it over the sound of the wind. The woman's hand, if it was a hand, pressed against the glass. Where it touched, ice began to form, spreading across the windshield in fractal patterns. The temperature inside the car plummeted. Rachel's breath came out in white clouds. The ice spread further, thicker. The car was beginning to freeze solid around her. In desperation, Rachel grabbed the gearshift and threw the car into drive, pressing the gas pedal to the floor. The tires caught something, and the car lurched forward. The woman vanished. 1 second she was there, the next she was gone, as if she'd been made of snow and the wind had blown her away. Rachel didn't stop driving. Even though she couldn't see, even though she had no idea if she was still on the road, she kept going. Eventually, the snow began to thin. She could make out shapes again: trees, a guardrail, the road itself. When she finally pulled into her driveway 20 minutes later, she sat in the car for a long time, shaking. Her windshield was completely covered in ice, but only on the outside. And in the ice, she could see something that made her blood run cold. A handprint. A perfect handprint, far too large to be human, with 6 fingers instead of 5. Rachel moved to Arizona the next month. She tells people it was for the weather, that she was tired of the cold. But sometimes, on the rare occasions when it snows in the desert, she stays inside with all the lights on. And if she sees someone standing alone in the snow, she looks away. Always looks away. Because she knows now that some things in the winter aren't people at all. They're something older, something that lives in the spaces between snowflakes, something that wears a human shape the way you might wear a coat. And they're always looking for someone who'll stop, who'll help, who'll get close enough to touch. Don't be that person. If you see someone alone in a blizzard, drive past. I know it sounds cruel. I know it goes against everything you've been taught. But trust me. Whatever you see out there in the whiteout, whatever calls for help in a voice that sounds almost human, it's not what you think it is. And once you get close enough to see its real face, it's already too late. The breathing in the walls. Sarah was home alone during a blizzard when she heard it, a rhythmic breathing sound coming from inside the walls. She convinced herself it was the heating system until she turned it off completely. The breathing continued, slow and deliberate, moving from room to room throughout the night. When maintenance checked the next day, they found fresh claw marks on the inside of the air ducts, but whatever made them was gone. The footprints that followed. Mark woke at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom and noticed fresh snow had blown in through a window he'd forgotten to close. What terrified him were the wet footprints leading from the window, through his hallway, and stopping at his bedroom door, where he'd been sleeping. The prints were facing his room. The window was only on the 2nd floor. The woman who wasn't there. During a winter power outage, Jennifer used her phone's flashlight to navigate her apartment. In the kitchen, she saw a woman in old-fashioned clothes standing in the corner. When she screamed and looked again, the woman was gone, but Jennifer's breath was visible in that corner for the rest of the night, even though the rest of the apartment stayed warm. The knock at 3:33 a.m. Every night for a week, David heard 3 precise knocks on his front door at exactly 3:33 a.m. The camera showed nothing. On the 7th night, he waited by the door with a baseball bat. The knocks came, but from inside the closet next to the door. He moved out the next day. The ice scraping. Emma heard someone scraping ice off her windows from the outside. This continued for hours during a snowstorm. When she finally called the police, they found scrape marks on all her windows, including the one on the 3rd floor with no ledge, fire escape, or any possible way to reach it. The occupied basement. Tyler's landlord insisted the basement was sealed and inaccessible. But every night, he heard footsteps and moving furniture below him. After a particularly loud crash, he broke down the basement door. Inside, he found a living space with food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and a diary. The last entry, dated that morning, read, "He still doesn't know I'm here." The figure in the snow. Rebecca watched through her window as a figure stood motionless in her backyard during a snowstorm. It stayed there for 3 hours, never moving despite the wind and snow. When she called the police, they found nothing, but the snow where the figure had stood was completely undisturbed, as if nothing had been there at all. The warming house. James came home to find his house warmer than he'd left it. The thermostat was set higher, the oven was warm, and there was a coffee mug in the sink he didn't recognize. His security system showed no one entering or leaving. But his Wi-Fi history showed someone had been streaming movies on his TV all day. The child in the snow. Melissa heard a child crying outside during a blizzard. Against her better judgment, she opened the door to help, but no child was there. Just small footprints in the snow leading to her door, stopping, then continuing around her entire house, circling it dozens of times before leading back into the woods. The phone that kept ringing. During an ice storm that knocked out all power and cell service, Robert's unplugged landline rang continuously. When he finally answered, he heard his own voice from the other end saying, "Don't go in the attic." He hadn't been in his attic in years. When spring came and he finally checked, he found evidence someone had been living there all winter. Empty food containers, blankets, and dozens of photos of him sleeping, taken from his attic's access point directly above his bed. Stay safe during those long winter nights, and remember, sometimes the scariest sounds are the ones that shouldn't be possible. It started with a strange silence the moment Emma stepped out of her car. The mountains were usually loud at night, wind cutting through the trees, owls calling, branches snapping somewhere in the dark. But tonight, nothing. Just stillness. Emma had come to the old cabin to clear her mind for the weekend, away from work, away from problems, away from everyone. It was her family's property, empty for years, but she felt safe, at least at first. Inside, dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. She lit a few candles, set her bags down, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling crawling along her spine. The air felt heavier than usual, like someone else was breathing in the room with her. By 11 p.m., the wind finally picked up, brushing against the windows in long, dragging strokes. Emma lay on the old couch, reading, when suddenly, thunk, something hit the side of the cabin. She sat up slowly. Another thunk, harder this time, like someone knocking from outside. Emma took a flashlight and walked to the window, heart racing. When she looked out into the storm, she expected to see an animal. But instead, she saw footprints. Human footprints. Leading around the cabin in a full circle. She hadn't walked out there. Nobody had. Before she could process it, the power cut out, everything went dark. Her flashlight flickered, then died. Only the storm remained. Emma fumbled around and lit a candle. Its small flame shook violently, like it was afraid too. She grabbed her phone. No signal. No Wi-Fi. She was completely alone. Or so she thought. A whisper drifted across the room. Soft. Faint. Impossible. Emma. Her blood froze. The voice was behind her. Emma spun around. Nobody. The cabin was empty except for the shadows dancing against the walls. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things, but then the whisper came again, closer this time. "Why did you come back?" Emma stumbled toward the door, but before she could reach it, the handle began to turn on its own. Slowly. Quietly. Someone, or something, was trying to come inside. She backed away, breath shaking, and grabbed the nearest thing she could use as a weapon, a metal fire poker. The door creaked open just a few inches. But there was no one on the porch. Only snow, wind, and a single wet footprint on the wooden boards. Then the whispering started again, all around her, coming from the ceiling, the floors, the walls, as if the cabin itself was speaking. "You shouldn't have returned." The candles blew out. Total darkness swallowed her. Emma screamed and swung the poker wildly, nothing but empty air. She could hear footsteps moving circles around her in the dark. Then a cold hand touched her shoulder. "Stay." Emma bolted, crashing through the door into the snowstorm, running without looking back. She didn't stop until she reached her car, breath burning, fingers numb. She tried the key, nothing. Dead engine. Behind her, on the porch, a shadow stood watching. Long, tall. Not human. Its whisper carried through the storm one last time. "You will return." Emma never told anyone what happened that night. She sold the cabin. She moved to another city. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind blows against her windows, she still hears the whisper. Emma. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment the next horrifying story I should post, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mr. Bone.